We learned a lot about the customer needing education, moving them through the process, through to conversion, but then ultimately post-purchase to ensure that once they had bought that product and it was in home, were they enjoying it?
What happens when an e-commerce veteran brings lessons from the catalog era to the age of AI? That's exactly what e-commerce leader Rick Ragusa set out to do, bringing decades of experience from brands like Williams-Sonoma and Serena and Lily to lead Pendleton's digital transformation. In this episode, we explore how legacy brands evolve, why the post-purchase experience is the real growth driver, and what the rise of agent AI means for the future of e-commerce. Welcome to another episode of the e-commerce toolbox expert's perspective. Joining us today, we got Rick Ragusa. Rick and I know each other from his time at Pendleton's when he was the VP of e-com. So welcome to the show, Rick.
Thanks so much. Great being here.
Awesome. Rick, I always like to learn a bit more about the journeys of our guests. So I know that you've actually been at a few different companies that are customers, like the Balsam brands of the world and Pendleton's, but maybe I'd love to hear a bit more about your career journey and how you ended up in commerce. Because if I understand, I don't know if you exactly started there or stayed there the whole time of your career. So maybe talk to us a bit about that.
Sure. So I'm going to probably date myself, but I got into retail and direct-to-consumer years ago. I got my start at Williams-Sonoma when the world was all about catalog marketing. But the benefit of having worked for Williams-Sonoma at that time was multiple brands under one roof, and not only direct-to-consumer, which was all being driven by catalog, but retail as well. So kind of an early omni-channel environment, if you will, in making sure that customers were being able to engage with the brands, whether directly or in store. E-com wasn't even on the roadmap at that point in time. So ultimately, e-com came into play when the internet came into play, and I followed that path really for the balance of my career, whether it was working on the brand side, as you mentioned, for certainly companies like Williams-Sonoma, Smith & Hawken back in the day. Those were in the Bay Area. Those were some of the key direct-to-consumer brands that were also operating retail that a lot of us found ourselves spending time with and learning a lot. And I would say that what was sort of the common thread has been a common thread throughout my career, whether I've been on the brand side or spending a little bit of time on the solution side. It's really all been around this idea of really almost database marketing, right? It always comes back to data, customer data, behavioral data, demographic data, all the data that can be used to leverage the customer experience. And obviously now, and as we've been over the last couple of decades, heavily in the digital space, utilizing lots of new types of data, solutions have expanded, commerce capabilities expanded. But I've always found myself in that process of really, to some extent, being a database marketer, but being able to do that with great brands that really put the customer at the center of the brand and bring all functions in service of the customer. So that's been a pleasure. Obviously, my latest venture was with the Pendleton brand, a fantastic brand, heritage brand out of Portland. Unfortunately, they need the whole team in Portland, and I'm in San Francisco. So moving on to new opportunities. But same thing there, right? Great brand that was moving into really digital transformation and implementing the newest of Salesforce commerce capability. And then ultimately, before I exited, implementing Marketing Cloud. And again, trying to bring together as much solution side and data to improve customer experience. And that's really kind of been consistent throughout my career.
That's really cool. And maybe talk to us a bit about when you landed versus kind of where you left in your latest role. Like, how did you kind of mature the digital organization there?
Yeah. So when I joined, I literally joined Pendleton a couple weeks after they had just signed a new contract with Salesforce to move to the newest technology, SFRA. And so as I landed with Pendleton, really kind of quickly went to work on ensuring that what had been defined as the key requirements for a new implementation had really been thoroughly vetted before we got into the RFP process on finding an SI to work with us. So a lot of that, in a way, was a lot of work very fast, but it was great because it allowed us to, based on the work I had done with other brands in implementations, as well as some of the work I had done in consulting, was to really begin to build that understanding that when we talk about commerce, we're not just going to talk about the functionality of an e-com site. We're going to talk to the merchandising team. We're going to talk to the creative team. We're going to talk to the operations team, right? We're going to talk to all functions in the business so that we understand what are the very detailed technical requirements that we need to implement in this new instance of the website. And so I think that allowed the larger team within Pendleton to understand it's not just this ecom team over here that's going to be moving things forward. They're going to be doing that in partnership with the rest of the functions of the business. And I think that allowed us, although again, standing up a new site is never a small project, but I think that allowed us to build a new understanding and appreciation for how everybody and every function of the business needs to be part of those types of developments and implementations. So I think we learned a lot just going through the process of implementing SFRA, and that put us on a new sort of communication flow within the business overall. And I think by the time I had left, we had built a much stronger understanding of how everyone was going to participate in the ongoing roadmap of what was going to take the site to new levels and improve customer experience that was relevant to the brand itself. When you've got a brand with such great heritage and history, we want to be able to do as much as we can to bring that to the consumer to help them understand why they are buying a wool shirt for what the wool shirt has cost and why a blanket is so expensive. But all those things are critical to making sure that all functions of the business understand what's going on and how they participate.
Very cool. And you've obviously scaled different brands, some of them that you mentioned before. What are kind of some of the fundamentals across brands that always kind of sticks true?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to think back to my time at Serena and Lily, which is another fantastic brand. And I know that they've grown incredibly well over the years. And I think when I had joined on it at Serena and Lily, it still was I'm going to say in its infancy, excuse the pun, because they started in baby, but really they were sort of at the front end of developing their commerce business, utilizing catalog significantly. We continue to use catalog, but we also grew pretty significantly into digital marketing and all that it brings to bear. But I think that experience at Serena and Lily, which I think was common elsewhere, was really sort of understanding the full customer journey. Because I think at the time that I had joined Serena and Lily, there was a lot of focus, which is totally understandable, on the front end, making sure that the customer understood what was available, what the brand was about, the quality of the product, et cetera, but maybe not as much focus on the back end in terms of customer service post-purchase. And I think we had a great opportunity and we completely changed that flow, that there was now a new appreciation from the time that we were educating. We learned a lot about the customer needing education, moving them through the process, through to conversion, but then ultimately post-purchase to ensure that once they had bought that product and it was in home, were they enjoying it? Were there issues with it? And did we need and how do we need to solve any post-purchase issues? And so I think that was something that I've carried sort of into Serena and Lily, because it was, again, I go back to the early stages of Williams-Sonoma. The focus on the customer was so critical that I think as I moved through, and then especially at Serena and Lily, was, hey, wait a minute, there's this whole world that happens post-purchase. And how do we embrace that to make an even better customer experience and ensure we can drive loyalty? And so that's been consistent. And I think we did many of the same things at Pendleton, which is, let's make sure we understand what's happening post-purchase. And have we fully delivered on the customer's expectations?
Well, some things are timeless, to your point, and the customer journey and the customer experience matters, I don't think goes away. Maybe how you look at it and how you analyze the data will change over time, but it's really interesting to hear that. And when you're thinking about a legacy brand or a brand with a lot of history, how does that change how you approach direct marketing? Do you need to do as much brand investment? Maybe talk to us a bit about that. Like, how are you thinking about that?
It's interesting. And I'll go back to some degree, Smith & Hawken, I think to some degree, Serena and Lily, definitely Pendleton. Some of the consistencies there were the customer and the audience that knew the brand really well. And then it almost kind of fell off the cliff. It's like, so then there was an audience that had no understanding or knowledge of the brand. And I think that always surprises brands that have been in place for quite some time, especially those that are sort of legacy heritage brands. But nonetheless, that's been consistent in my view over time. And so what you realize is you're really now kind of talking and needing to serve at least a couple different audiences, probably more than that, but really an aware audience and an unaware audience. And so how do we take this story and experience that people who have been engaged with the brand for, in some cases, years and years, and explain why that's so critical and present that to an unaware audience? Because at the end of the day, it's those elements of the brand and the brand story that are going to attract a new audience and help them to engage with the brand as they discover it. And so that I think was a lot of our focus, which is how do we ensure that there's an appreciation for this brand story that so many people don't know? Let's make sure we tell that story appropriately. And I think in working with the creative team at Pendleton, we made a lot of movement forward in ensuring that when you came to the site, however, or into the stores, no matter how you engaged with the brand, you were learning about the rich story and the heritage of the brand. And I think that has allowed for a lot of improvement with other brands I've worked for, is making sure that we tell that story appropriately. The customer has needs throughout their journey, and we want to address those needs, but we also want to make sure that they're learning about the brand.
If you're listening to the e-commerce toolbox, you're entitled to a podcast exclusive website audit. Go to noibu.com/podcast-audit for a free scan that uncovers the hidden friction blocking your conversions and shows you where you're leaking revenue.
I think we've chatted a lot about the constants of commerce, which you've seen through multiple platform shifts from offline to online. Do you think there's a platform shift with like agentic shopping, with like the introduction of like AI and these LLMs? Like, do you think that's going to be a platform shift, or is that going to be more of like a channel, like social media? Curious to get your thoughts.
Great question. I was just at Dreamforce and sat in on a few sessions, and one in particular in commerce and agentive commerce. And it's incredibly impressive. I think what it clearly points out is that you're really going to have your data environment in order, because without really strict discipline, if you will, around the data, which is really what you need to drive that agentive experience, you may be caught a little bit at a loss. So I was thoroughly impressed by what we saw in terms of some of the latest development that's coming out of Salesforce, obviously having just come from a commerce cloud world, Salesforce, and having been in the early days with Demandware, which ultimately became commerce. It was great to see that kind of development. I think it changes. So often we are focused around how customers engage on desktop versus on mobile, being mobile first, et cetera, et cetera. But I think now when you think about mobile first, it puts it into a whole new light in terms of how the consumer or the customer not only engages with their device, but the expectation as to what they are going to expect that experience to be like. As you bring in that kind of capability, it changes the whole customer interaction with the technology as well as with the brand. And so, I think it's platform change to the extent that it's going to set a whole new level of expectation on the consumer. And that's going to happen incredibly fast. It's happening already, but it's going to happen incredibly fast. And so I think definitely for the younger consumer who is digesting and consuming new capability at a rapid pace versus maybe that older consumer that maybe isn't engaging with technology as well, I think it's going to start to bring some of that together, because it becomes so intuitive on being able to engage with the technology that my sense is that new platform will be easier to engage across different user types as we move forward. I could be wrong, but based on what I've seen, I think it almost levels the playing field, because it becomes a sort of very human, intuitive interaction process and experience. So that's kind of what I was seeing coming out of Dreamforce.
And do you think that all centralizes under like one main LLM, like for example, Google or ChatGPT, or do you think it's still going to be like hosted on your own website? Do you know what I mean? Like where you'd go to a URL through a browser and then interact there? Or do you think it removes a layer? Do you know what I mean? Like the layer in the middle gets removed.
Yeah. My expectation would be that it brings a lot of power back into the brand itself to self-manage and develop. It's a great question. I think clearly the search engines are busy for a land grab on where and who's going to win out. But ultimately, I think it's going to put a lot of power back into the brand side based on the way the technology is being developed and presented out to the industry. So it'll be interesting to see. Certainly, we're already seeing massive changes in how search and SEO are working and how we'll work forward based on LLM. It's going to shift dramatically, but I get the sense that it's going to allow the brands to be far more nimble and allow them to advance their experiences really independent of the larger search engines. But it'll be interesting to see. I think certainly they're looking to be able to bring that kind of entire solution to the brands and to the industry. But I think because of the technology and the way it's been developed, it allows the brands to really kind of own it, if you will. So we'll see where that splits. I don't know.
I agree. As we look to wrap up, Rick, maybe talk to me a bit about what do you think some of the biggest trends are going to be for next year, and where you think folks that are heading up ecom and digital divisions, where should they be placing their bets?
Well, I think we've seen the trend for quite some time. I think in terms of the importance of video, whether it's going to be AI generated or sort of more traditional production, the consumer is engaging with content in a very different way. And the consumer wants to engage with the brands in a way that helps them to really understand the value of the brand. And there's so much that can be brought to and told in the video format, just as a visual format, that I think that need to have really high quality video to really help the consumer engage with the brand and understand the product is going to become imperative. That, I think, and how we now will be able to produce video will be so fast, and it'll allow brands to iterate. I think the idea of being able to iterate and test and tweak creative and tweak content to optimize it to a perfect level where you're truly meeting the customer's needs as they learn about the brand and the product and then ultimately convert. That, I think, is going to be and will have to be the primary focus for the commerce space, just because I think that is how the consumer is going to want to experience the brand. And so, again, I know that there's the constant argument and discussion around, does AI help develop jobs? Does it take jobs away? I don't know that anybody really knows the answer to that just yet, but it would seem to me that it's creating new requirements. So I think the types of jobs are probably going to continue to shift and introduce new opportunities for people and functions that will continue to develop in order to support a new world of commerce and how the consumer will expect to engage with a brand. That's what I'm seeing.
Makes a lot of sense. I think through all these platform changes, there's some constants and then there's some unknowns. And I'm very curious to see where we land. Rick, it was amazing catching up with you. Thanks again for hopping on the show, and we're excited to see where you land next.
I appreciate it. Great talking with you. Take care.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.